I might have stayed in college if I had found a teacher like you, but one of my favorite things I've heard you say is that you would often tell your graduate students they have no business being a scholar of religion until they've lost at least two worlds. And that is definitely in the lifeblood of this show. For you, I know it was a Catholic upbringing world and then a Hindu tantric world. For me, it was also a Catholic upbringing and then probably an atheistic world. But you start to realize that maybe you shouldn't get too attached to any one world because they're all just perspectives, and you actually see more by shifting that perspective more often, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's what I mean about losing two worlds. I mean, if you've lost just one world, the chances are very good you've just jumped into another one, and you think it now has all the answers. But when you lost two worlds, you start to think twice about jumping into another world, because, as you say, they're perspectives. They give you certain things for sure, but they don't. They take away other things. And so I think the trick is not inhabiting too strongly, at least a single world, but kind of moving between them.
Yes, I think that's very wise in our religious lives, in our political lives, in so many different areas. I stopped trying to label myself with any identifier because I find that either the definition of that label shifts or my own understanding of the world shifts. So the lesson there is, yeah, just don't do that. Just be an
Yeah,
individual looking at many different things.
yeah, yeah. My version of that, Greg, is I occasionally I'll go into a comic book store, like the present ones where like they're selling old comics, and the idea is you're going to look for the comic or the statue or whatever the is, and if this is going to be your worldview, and of course it never is. And I've realized over the years that there's nothing there because because I don't inhabit a particular world. It's kind of open ended.
Amen. And so, with this same theme, when it comes to the paranormal, one of my favorite ways to explore it is to compare the different boxes we put these things in and see if we should have boxes at all, like abduction experience versus occult experience or fairy folklore and Bigfoot. And this comparative approach is a big part of your work. We're well familiar with contemporary paranormal experience, but can you talk to us about the overlap with the high strangeness experiences often reserved for religious framings?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I got into this through the study of religion, and more specifically through the comparative study of religion. And the idea is that you're not assuming the truth of any particular religion. You're trying to look at them all and see what they have in common, and of course, how they also differ. And when I encountered people's paranormal experiences or extreme religious experiences today, they struck me immediately as deeply religious and is obviously connected to these pre-modern and even ancient experiences that I was trained as a graduate student not to take too seriously, to see as exaggerations or legends or power plays, essentially, attempts to kind of acquire authority. And when I encountered these same sorts of experiences in the modern world, I realized actually that these models that I was trained in don't really work, and that there's something else going on. And then, where I eventually landed is that I think paranormal experiences in particular are kind of the building blocks. They're the pieces that then get built up into larger religions and civilizations and cultures. And so we can actually look at those cross culturally and back through time and figure out how things are put together, essentially.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really wise. And there are a lot of things that I remember from the Catholic upbringing, just all the miracles, turning into a pillar of salt, glowing beams of light, information downloads. These things are definitely in the mix. They check a lot of the same boxes. And I think it was Adamski's experience where his download, they said, yeah, we're responsible for all the religions of the world. And when I was a little younger, that really resonated with me. When I was still kind of in that atheistic world, I was like, well, there's an explanation. It is all the aliens. And it turns out there may be a little bit to that. The whole cargo cult idea, the whole UFO religion, when you have these experiences, you have that shock that the world is much bigger. And for some reason, that makes people want to come to more conclusions rather than fewer. It's just odd. They start to craft a box and then they're like, this is the one true message. And you would think that it would instead open them up and make them stand back a lot further, but maybe a lot of religions are started from one of these experiences.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, that's the core, I think, of what we're trying, maybe what we're talking around. I think there is a core there. I think the UFO experience and the history of religions are definitely connected, but I think the question is how they're related, and I think that what most people want to do is they want certainty. They want the answer, right? And so they want to affirm their present mythology or worldview, which in our case is science and space exploration and extraterrestrials, and they want to read that back into the past where it doesn't really belong, and doesn't quite work. It kind of works. But the other option is to take that past worldview, some form of religious belief, and read it into the present and say, oh, well, these are angels or these are demons or whatever. Like, well, that doesn't really work either. So both of those lines or arrows give us something, but they also take away something. And I just want to say, now, hold on. Let's sit in the middle of this and let's acknowledge the similarities, but let's not jump into a particular interpretation or a particular worldview, which is what people are always trying to do. So I that's not a very popular message, Greg, because it doesn't lead to an answer. And this worldview you were describing earlier that you're in, and I think I'm in as well, it's pretty lonely, right? I mean, it's hard to build community with uncertainty and ambiguity and a kind of global appreciation of religion, but also a global suspicion of religion. Um, so I guess I'm just blabbing. I do think that there's something that is gained. I think it's a more honest approach. I think we're just trying to be honest about what we're seeing and feeling and thinking. But on the other hand, that kind of honesty leads to loneliness, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I trade in unpopular opinions and messages, so you're in the right spot. But that is one of my favorite things that you say is looking at that context, because I think part of the journey for me and a lot of people is you're thinking aliens because you grew up in this culture. And then someone says, well, look at the grimoires. A lot of these experiences are similar. And then you think, oh, well, maybe they're demons. Maybe that is the right context. But you forget that all of that stuff was created in a time where they had a lot of cultural residue. You're
Yeah.
looking at your own cultural residue and saying, yeah, maybe the sci-fi lens is incorrect. Maybe the old lens is right, but they have the same problem. It's a parallel situation. We need a framework that doesn't have any residue to it, which maybe is not possible. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible not to have cultural overlay or cultural residue, but I think it is possible to be aware of one's own cultural overlay or residue. I think reflexivity or kind of stepping out of one's worldview, I think is possible, but I don't think any kind of pure model or knowledge here is something we should even be attempting, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's possible.
I just thought of another guest who's brought you up, Dr. Jack Hunter, who has done a lot of work in anthropology with this kind of stuff. And that's another field, just like religion, where, man, we did a disservice dismissing a lot of this stuff. All the legwork of going around the world, talking to indigenous cultures, and then saying, oh, that's a cute little superstition you have that didn't actually happen, instead of trying to find a way to incorporate their experiences with the paranormal, which do seem to happen in greater frequency the closer community is with nature. I would say there's something to that relationship, because you look at the indigenous cultures and they usually have the most complex systems of understanding time or understanding dream and dream world and dream language. It's like there's something there that if you live in the concrete jungle and you get this industrialized technical society, I guess maybe that roots you more in the physical rather than being out in the woods where these things just happen. They're part of the thing, as is a jaguar walking near the camp to a degree. Even in modern times, these things happen when we're in a cabin in the woods or driving down a lonely road. It doesn't happen often in Times Square, to my knowledge. But what are your thoughts on that? The relationship between living closer to nature and the potency and frequency of such experiences.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of thoughts about that. But the issue I always think about here is the psychedelic renaissance and the kind of research that's going on now in mostly departments of psychiatry in universities, and looking at psilocybin and DMT and the way they induce particular kinds of altered states and whether those states are healing or not. And those programs tend to have very practical, very pharmaceutically oriented goals in mind. And my concern with them is that a lot of the experiences people have on these psychoactive molecules are animist in structure, and by that I mean they involve things like talking animals and talking plants and cosmic experiences of deity and deification, and I mean really extreme stuff that is not extreme at all if you know something about the history of religions. But I don't think I know that those plants have had a very difficult history with Western or European monotheism. And I mean a deadly past. I don't mean just a difficult past. I mean literally deadly. A colonizing. Monotheism has colonized those cultures in a really violent and dramatic way. And so I worry, frankly, about the religious clashes that are sort of underneath this psychedelic renaissance. And I worry the same thing. I think a lot of paranormal experiences are essentially animist in structure as well, Greg. And, you know, monotheism hasn't had such a great history with magical practice either.
No.
And we forget that in the modern world. We just, you can go to your bookstore and you can buy some incense or crystals or whatever book you want. But actually, historically, it's been pretty nasty. So I think there are clashes of sort of metaphysical views going on, and that this explains, for me, why things are resisted so dramatically, even though the resistance makes no sense on the surface. I mean, the things people say about out-of-body experiences and UFOs and synchronicities it's kind of bizarre. But it makes a lot of sense, actually, if you read it as a kind of unconscious rejection of a particular kind of worldview or a particular metaphysical position.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2-hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.
The Higherside Chat Show, Kripal.